to speak on this very important debate following the Prime Minister's statement. The Prime Minister's speech was not only aspirational, practical, wide-reaching, but extremely forward-looking and positive for all New Zealand, and he got the standing ovation he deserved. But what a treat, Mr. Speaker, it was to see the smile on Shane Jones's face by the time Phil Goff had finished. Shane Jones knew there was an opportunity coming. Phil Goff and Labour lost all their credibility this afternoon. In fact, Phil Goff claimed that he opposed the introduction of GST, yet he was in the very government that introduced GST. If there's any legacy of that 84-90 government, commentators around the world have applauded, it was indeed the GST and the fairness and the way it was introduced. Yet here we have Phil Goff, perhaps in true Judas-like fashion, denying he voted it in. This afternoon, Phil Goff went on to say that the Governor of the Reserve Bank was right. Governor Alan Bollard's remarks about catching up with Australia were, in my view, Mr. Speaker, pessimistic and dour. A little bit like the last speech that we heard. And this is in sharp contrast to one of the great qualities of our Prime Minister, John Key. He is optimistic, he is quick, he is determined through practical common sense planning to bring about a brighter future for all New Zealanders. Phil Goff literally lost his mojo this afternoon. Any sense of credibility went out the window when he claimed that the government has no plan. How many times do we have to spell out to Phil Goff that at the heart of the government's economic plan lies 6 main policy drivers, let alone the clear accomplishments and plans that have occurred in law and order, in health, in education, that have been spelt out to Phil Goff time and time again, Mr. Speaker. The first of the economic plans is indeed developing a world-class tax system. For 9 years, all that Labour government could do was complicate New Zealand's tax system and erode the ethic of reward for hard work. And at the same time, we watched New Zealand hemorrhage 30,000 New Zealanders across the ditch to Australia every year. Under Labour, 10 times as many New Zealand graduates left New Zealand permanently as did Australians leave Australia. That was the legacy of the Labour government. A national government, after a widely publicised and discussed tax task force, will bring in a fair system that is simple and that incentivises New Zealanders by rewarding them for hard work. The second area, of course, is better public services. And here, of course, we saw under Labour massive growth in bureaucracy in the order of 30,000 extra public servants. And I must repeat what Greg Foss mentioned earlier, that it was Labour who brought in a policy of increasing CEO salaries by 5% a year for 5 years, which we have recently stopped or immediately stopped, and here Phil Goff is campaigning on lowering that CEO's salary. There is only one word for that, and I'm not allowed to state it in this House. I'm not allowed to state it in this House. But, Mr. Speaker, one of the worst areas that occurred under Labour was in the health sector. And the failure, despite putting in $6 billion more to increase elective surgery in any way. In 1 year under this national government and its clearly signalled plans to focus on frontline health services, National has delivered an additional 11,805 elective operations, a record annual increase. And I want to say that again. In 1 year under this national government, there has been delivered an additional 11,805 elective operations, a record annual increase. And there is a pathway of sensible, practical plans after the ministerial review to clear up the mess the Labor government left in the area of health. The next area is support for science, innovation and trade. And when Phil Goff says there is no plan, he forgets that under National this year, the Primary Growth Partnership will be fully up and running, with the government investing up to $40 million alongside industry, and this is going to increase to $70 million in the future. Phil Goff forgets his government had a plan to bring in an undirected tax credit that would inevitably have been rorted, as it has been around the world, and he forgets that Labor's so-called fast forward, although sounding large in number, was not an economically sensible way of funding anything at all. Phil Goff also forgets that one of the most positive initiatives, if not the most positive initiative, that came out of the Copenhagen conference last year was New Zealand's initiative, the Global Research Alliance, to drive much-needed research on agricultural greenhouse gas emissions. This is good for science, it's good for New Zealand, and it's good for the world. I'm extremely excited, Mr. Speaker, by the fact that the National Government appointed a science advisor of the calibre of Sir Peter Gluckman, and that John Key has said that science and innovation will be at the centre of the National Government. And to put it in John Key's words, we have made this area a priority of new spending in this year's budget, with a focus on boosting business research and science capability. Phil Goff, just try and concentrate. This is all part of a well-thought-out, integrated plan. And, Mr. Speaker, the other three areas are investment in infrastructure, $7.5 billion in the next years. Regulatory reform, the first tranche has already been done, the second tranche of the Resource Management Act about to be done, and thirdly, education and skills. How can Phil Goff say there are no plans when under his Labor government, over 20% of our children left school without the appropriate skills to get a job in the new world? Mr. Speaker, National has a very clear plan, Phil Goff, and that is to introduce national standards to year 1 to 8. A vast majority of parents want this to happen for our children. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to mention that over the last 2 weeks, I've had the privilege to attend both Ratana and Waitangi. There is a great new mood. It is one of collaboration and one of aspiration. Under the National Party, Maori Party, ACT and United Coalition, there is a bright future for all New Zealanders. Phil Goff is wrong. National has a very clear plan. His problem is he's not included, and the smile on Shane Jones' face is getting wider and wider.